Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar comic review. This is going to be my full spoiler review for Avatar The Last Airbender North and South Part 2. Middle part of this three-part series. The book is released today, January 25th, Wednesday, in comic book stores. Anyone else who has it ordered on Amazon, if you're waiting for it, can't get it in the comic book store, you're going to be waiting until February 7th, or in or around there, for it to be shipped out or available in regular bookstores. I think that's also when digital copies should be available. Also, before I jump into the actual review here, I'll just let you guys be aware that linked in the description is my spoiler text review. So if you just want to read instead of listening to a video, there is a really in-depth text review for myself where I just basically talk about the key plot points that I didn't mention in my non-spoiler review. Also linked in the description is going to be a link to the podcast that myself, Kelly and Greg, the whole Avatar Online podcast crew, did for this book. It's nearly 3 hours long. It's a super in-depth podcast where we go through the book page by page, analysing everything, giving our opinions on it as we go through. If you can't read the book for a while, I think that's a decent way to actually experience the book, because we do read out the majority of the dialogue and go through it. So just be aware that that's there if you want a super in-depth thing. I also put it up as a video on my channel. It's the video just before this one. But yeah, let's get into North and South Part 2. There's that. There's the back cover for anyone wondering. This panel is from a kind of action scene more towards the end of the book, so that's that. So yeah, I've already talked about this a little bit in my non-spoiler review a few weeks back because I got a review copy. Went to my comic book store, got this today. So I'm just going to talk about the key spoiler plot points, the stuff that I haven't covered, the stuff that I've left out of those reviews. So the first major talking point, I think, is definitely the smallest point in the book, but also one of the more mysterious ones. And it links into North and South Part 1 in that we got that bit of dialogue when they met Paku upon first returning to the South. And he basically said, I'm trying to train up waterbenders here in the South. He has a school. And he says, that's the interesting part. Come visit me when you get the chance. In response to Katara's question about, where did you get the students? Down here. So clearly alluding to the fact that he found southern waterbenders, but without quite confirming it. So what do we get in Part 2 on that? We get 2 pages to address this. And it's interesting, it's certainly interesting, but it's only given 2 pages. It's still vaguely handled, and the way it's done is that Paku introduces Katara at the festival to 2 southern waterbenders, Siku and Sura, who we see here. Now, I'm assuming that they're maybe both girls, or potentially one of them is a boy, one of them is a girl. Siku as a girl's name, I don't know. Sura's definitely a girl's name from what I can tell, and it's definitely referring to the younger girl. The other person, maybe based on the hair, probably is a girl as well. So they're probably 2 female waterbenders again. And basically all we get here is we introduce them to Katara. And she asked them how their bending training is going. And they say, bad, real bad, because we're not waterbenders. So even though Paku said, I'm training them, they, in response to Katara, who's a master waterbender, say, we're not benders, and run off. And basically, Katara's just care to explain this, Paku? And he just says that's the way they are. Him and Gran found them in a tiny village east of here. They live about as far inland as a tribe can, well out of sight from the shore. And we see in the background that they are in fact bending. So they are benders. And he says that they're actually quite talented for their age. And we finish off this section by saying, it's like they don't want to share their bending with anyone but themselves. And that's it. We don't refer back to these 2 characters again. Katara doesn't think over the course of the comic about these characters again. We just are presented with this. I really am unsure how to think about this, in that, 1, cool reveal. More southern waterbenders. That's a big reveal. Especially for Katara. I'm surprised she didn't have any sort of reaction to finding out that there are actually other southern benders. That to me was a big surprise. They reveal that they actually are from a tiny village east of the main south village, and they live quite far inland, is pretty telling in that, like, we only really know of the South, at least from ATLA time, as kind of being one small village. But this revealed that there are actually other ones scattered around the place. Makes sense. Tribal culture. There are, of course, different tribes down there. So this is an inland tribe, and you could sort of question, like, how long has this been around? Did they manage to actually avoid the majority of the attack that Zulon obviously called upon for the South, which led to the death of Kaya? Like, is that kind of what's happening here? That the Southern Raiders, basically, when they came, is this what the result, that, like, these people that were further inland survived that, and there were some waterbenders there as well? I'm not really sure. Or is it just that they're trying to highlight the whole idea of they don't want to share it with themselves, anyone with themselves? That to some extent, it's thematically over the course of the book symbolizing this idea that the South are quite isolationists, that they keep to themselves. They don't want to be part of the greater world stage, in touch with the other nations. So the North coming down here is a nuisance rather than an attempt to really form an alliance with other nations. Is that what they're getting at? Because it sort of is a theme of this book, of, like, the South perhaps don't want to do all of this stuff, but why don't they want to? Is it because they just want to stick to themselves, be on their own, or what? That's all I can really think about with them, because I don't think we're going to get crazy backstory on these two characters, because we only have one North and South left, and there's so much for part 3 to cover. So I really don't know what they're going to do on that front. The next major plot point is the big Katara and Hakoda scene, which is one of the best done scenes in the entire book, and how it transitions into the Katara Aang scene. So well written. So what I like in this is that both Hakoda and Katara are extremely well written. Hakoda, we always know, is this kind of very strong character, the leader of the South, but he's also, like, a super understanding character. We saw that in 301 when Katara had her issues with her father, and kind of let her kind of frustrations with what Aang was doing in that episode also apply to him, and he was understanding of that. And it's the same here. He knows there's something up. He knows it's related to Melina and the awkwardness of learning about their relationship in the way that she did. And he basically just apologizes for that. I should have told you immediately. And what I really, really like is that the core of basically Katara's, like, feelings about this are not that she doesn't want her father to move on, that she's against that. It's not even necessarily that she thinks that Kaya is being replaced, which I was worried about, that would be the brick wall that kind of Katara puts up in response to the Melina thing, that you will never replace my mom and stuff like that. They touch on that, but it seems to not be necessarily the biggest of issue. It's a slight thing there. Maybe if their relationship progresses too quickly, maybe Kaya will come back up again. But primarily Katara's issue is just with, why is it her? Why is it Melina specifically? That's the only issue. Like, are you sure you're ready to move on, and why her? And that it just happens to be the case of, like, Katara happened to have quite, poor interactions with Melina in part 1, and some of the little things that Melina said that I think we as fans obviously ultimately realised she didn't really mean the way she did. She just kind of misspoke a little bit, and Katara took them the wrong way, and so has a kind of very poor kind of opinion on Melina right now. And it's interesting that she talks about, Melina doesn't understand us, the South. I think she's up to something nefarious. And Hakoda here is very honest with Katara, and I really like that even if you don't trust her, you have to trust me. Melina still has a lot to learn about our way of life, but deep down inside she has a good heart. I wouldn't have fallen in love with her otherwise. So straight away, Hakoda has revealed that he loves Melina, which establishes that their relationship has been developing for longer than just, oh, it happened at the very end of part 1. This has been a thing that has developed over the course of a couple of months, during basically while all of the other comics were happening, and even before that. I think that since Katara and Sokka are just returning to the tribe here, Hakoda's been there for a while, Melina's been there for a while. Their relationship has had time to develop, to the point where it can be love. It's not this super sudden thing. And Katara responds to this by saying, no offense, but what if you're being blinded by your feelings? And I love Hakoda's response to this. You're old enough now that we can talk about these things. You know what it's like to be in love, right? And Katara says yes. So you know that the right kind of love, the kind that's real, that sacrifices, that kind of love doesn't blind you. It actually helps you see. As what comes into view? Appa with Aang, as well as Momo. So they return, and that's the amazing scene transition that I talked about in my non-spoiler review. That he just talks about it actually helps you to see, and who does Katara see arrive? Aang. Immediately she runs over, the really lovely relationship that Katara and Aang have, and they hug, missed you so much, can I kiss you? Maybe not in front of Dad. They catch up on what went on in Smoke and Shadow, Aang revealing to Katara that it was actually Azula, not Spirit. Hakoda and Aang have a brief conversation with basically Aang being the usual, a little bit overly formal. Congratulations, head chieftain Hakoda, sir. Please just call me Hakoda Aang, and so on. And we finish off this scene with basically Hakoda just saying, "You two go and enjoy the festival. I'll stand watch here in case Gilak does anything at the festival." And Katara, really importantly here, given what's just happened, says, "My dad's always been kind to you, hasn't he?" "Yeah, of course. Why do you ask?" I've just been thinking I ought to do the same for him. That Hakoda, she realizes her father has been nothing but supportive of her relationship with Aang, and she owes it to him to give him a chance. That she has kind of, to some extent, put Hakoda through a lot with the whole 301 thing, and now the issues that are happening here. And she is just, for the fact that her father is in love, is willing to give it a chance and try harder with Melina, which she immediately tries in the following scene. She thanks Melina for inviting her to the festival. She's like, "Oh, well, I'll introduce you to Aang. You've never met the Avatar before." They're actually getting on quite nice, and Katara's realizing that Melina is actually quite a nice person, which this book does a really good job at showcasing. Like, I know everyone was speculating after part 1 of like, "Oh, Melina's evil. Oh, Malik's evil. Gilak, maybe there's more to him, but he's evil." Melina isn't. Like, she may have some of her kind of intentions perhaps in the wrong place. Maybe isn't thinking about things in the correct way, not asking the right questions, but fundamentally she has a good heart, as Hakoda says. So that's definitely a key thing to keep in mind. I don't have really any suspicions about Melina after reading this book at all, and in fact feel quite sorry for her as a character given what happens. So this positive relationship that's developing between Melina and Katara is immediately stopped once Gilak attacks the festival. Now, before that, we do get Melina giving the speech, which is basically explaining what her and the Reconstruction Project are actually planning to do in the South. It's more than just rebuilding some cities, it's the overall plan to help improve the South. So what is it? It's basically this: we'll help you to make the most of your natural resources so you can finally establish a presence for yourself on the world stage. The idea being that prior to this, we get revealed that the South actually has the biggest oil deposit in the entire world, completely untapped, and it could really help to advance the world if that oil was extracted and distributed around the world. And the South could make lots of money from this and really become somewhat of a powerhouse on the world stage if this happened. So some political stuff and, fine. But as Melina gives this speech, we get shots of the crowd and they're just like, is that a good thing? Like, a lot of people seem quite confused. Like, what does it mean that we have oil? We're extracting it? What's that going to mean? What does that do? What does it even mean to be on the world stage? Does it matter that we're, like, trading with other nations? Like, because the key thing to remember here is that the South is a quite simplistic nation. They are a tribal culture, even more so than the North. That they hunt, that's how they get their food. They're quite simple. They don't have a ton of technology. That's not their way. So immediately talking about like industry, we'll have a mining industry set up here, and we'll do all this stuff, and we'll help you, and trade deals. Like there's like you've gone past us. So the only thing Melina is really guilty of is like not asking the question, do the South want this? Like she's just like, oh, it'll help you, so we'll just do it. But they're like, we don't really know about this. So there's the thing. And just before they can get Toph up on stage to talk about the Earth and Fire Refinery's involvement, Gilak arrives via drill. And this is the key plot point of this book. Gilak, with the plans that he stole from Malik in the first part, reveals the truth behind what's actually happening here. And it's really interesting how this plays out. He basically says, I read the documents, this is my interpretation of it. That you came here to subjugate and humiliate us. You want to strip our lands and destroy everything that we are. You claim the oil for the north and not for the south, and basically make the south a colony of the north. And Melina has to reveal that, yes, that is the truth. It is our plan, at least what it used to be. That used to be our plan, but we changed it. We never ever used the word colony in any sort of relation to the plan. But we did sort of worry that the South wasn't ready to handle such an important resource. But she says we were wrong. And as she's about to explain herself and her reasoning behind why she changed the plan from one that was quite exploitive of the South to helping the South, actually, Malik speaks up and says, I never changed the plan. I purposefully kept this from you and never actually changed the plan. And we see him give his true thoughts, that he doesn't care for the South. He just sees them as these savages that have tribal get-ups, and talks about how they're a backward society. They don't have they don't even have a cohesive set of laws, and that an actual civilization needs to be in charge of this important resource. Because Malik's whole thing, as we get here, is that he's all about advancing the world via machinery. That he thinks that benders and non-benders can be more equal if there's more machinery, because then non-benders can do some of the same things as benders can do. Like the earth and fire refinery, there's the bender line there that does the work very efficiently, but then there's the non-bender line with the machinery that does it just as well. And that's a cool idea, but you can see the hypocrisy here in that Malik is basically, campaigning for equality here, using this oil to make the world a better place, except the South. That because they're a backward society, they're not an actual civilization, they won't be part of what we consider equal because they're the backward savages, We'll just take from them the stuff that they don't know how to use, we'll make everyone else equal, and you're just the way you are. So very hypocritical. And Melina's basically just like, stop talking, Malik. That's not how I feel about this, and you are completely vilifying us to everyone here. And ends up inciting Gilak enough to cause him to attack. So Malik effectively digs his own grave by just kind of completely insulting everyone at this moment. It's a really bad decision by Malik to do what he did, but we'll continue anyway. So yeah, that's what happens here. The fight takes place. No one's in too much danger, but because of the numbers, the sheer numbers, Melina and Malik are chased out of the village. And Katara temporarily goes down just because she gets distracted by Melina trying to explain to her. She takes a hit, goes down, and Thawd appears before her and talks about the snow rat story from the first volume, and says, they may invite you to their campfire, they may flatter you with pretty words, they may even put together a lovely festival for you, but make no mistake, in their eyes you'll never be anything more than the snow rat. Will you support Gilak's cause? So at this point in time, you're kind of like, will Katara actually side with him? Because she's just heard the truth about Melina and Malik and what they were originally planning to do to the South, that they want to extract this oil and change everything. And here's what she does. She looks at Aang, who's fighting nearby, turns back the thought and says no. So clearly this idea of what Hakoda said, love, real love helps you to see, gives Katara clarity enough to make this decision, to side not with the extremists. And even though she still agrees with aspects of what they do, she knows she shouldn't side with them. Thawd obviously is like, oh, that's disappointing, and reveals that he's actually a chi blocker. Him and a couple of other people on Gilak's side have the ability to chi block. They don't explain details behind how they know how to chi block or anything like that, but it's an interesting reveal nonetheless that we find this out. So obviously Melina and Malik are chased out of the city. They're put in a net, Melina's chi blocked, and Gilak is basically about to kill them in front of everyone. Here's what he says. Now the tribe needs the two of you to serve as an example. Your demise will be a warning to all the foreign powers who think they can trample over our people, that they need to think again. So he is using this as a way to kind of be like, no one messes with the South. We will kill you if you mess with us. Hugely extreme. That like if you had any sort of sympathy for Gilak because of the way the North didn't participate in the war and the sacrifices that he and the other Southerners made, this kind of gets in the way of a lot of that, you really feeling for him, because this idea that he will kill people who are maybe misguided but are still trying to help, kill them just because they slightly disagree with you and have a different view on things, to create this warning to people to stay away. Like, you can sort of see the isolationist kind of view, that he just wants to keep the South to themselves. Hakoda stops this from happening, of course. He arrives at this point. Another really well done scene here between Hakoda and Gilak, because they're obviously allies. We know that. They fought together during the war. And the key gist of it here is that Hakoda believes that people can change. Zuko changed. He was one of our enemies. Now he's one of our fiercest allies. And Gilak agrees, saying that, like, I believe it too. You changed, Hakoda. I used to think you were just blinded by your idealism, but now I see the truth. You're a traitor. As they fight, Hakoda gets the advantage. And even though he could have, I suppose if he wanted to, finished off, hurt Gilak, he chooses to offer his hand that, like, I'm still open to you helping us to figure this out. Together we can fix this. Gilak takes his hand, but in his other hand he has a knife, and he stabs Hakoda. Huge moment. We get a couple of injuries, a couple of big injuries, like Aang was obviously like killed, Jet killed, stuff like that. Characters, get burns every so often. But just someone being full on stabbed, we don't really see too often. And you see Melina's reaction there. She's the first one to get a reaction panel. That's the reaction of someone who is super close to someone who's just been stabbed. Katara's reaction is intense. At this point in time, everyone arrives, and Gilak and his forces are captured. Katara manages to heal Hakoda, and he is revealed to be okay, even though he's injured. Gran gives an interesting point after this, talking about wounds flow from wrong actions flow from wrong beliefs. Someone needs to re-examine their beliefs. And they try to create a sort of rift here. At this point in time, a couple of pages from the end of the book, they try and create a rift between Sokka and Katara. I don't know if it's meaningful or what, but Sokka's like, Gilak needs to re-examine his beliefs. Katara's like, Melina and Malik do. And then they disagree, like, no, Katara's like, the oil shouldn't be extracted. Sokka's like, yeah, it should. Their idea maybe isn't perfect, but it's still at its core good. We need to get with the times. But Katara says, not if it means forgetting who we are. And then we get, for me, like, as we end this kind of present-day stuff, one of the more frustrating parts of the book. One of the key parts where I just say, oh, I don't like the writing in this scene. I really am not happy with the way they're kind of going here. Katara and Melina have a talk here. And the key thing here is that obviously Katara is not happy about what was just revealed about Melina. And Melina says, I swear to you all those things my brother said, I don't believe them. And Katara says, anymore. And she says, you don't believe them anymore. Not after you fell in love with my dad. But what happens when you fall out of love, Melina? And then Melina says, Katara, it goes deeper than that. And Katara's just like, ignores it and says, I'm going to ask you again, what are you doing here? You don't deserve to say goodbye to my father. But Gran comes out and says, Hakoda wants to speak to you. And that's where we end this part of the story. We get the final bit of like Gilak being given the key to be released from prison. But that's where we end the Katara and Melina story. Just with Hakoda calling Melina in to speak. It kind of ends in midair with no idea of like, what on earth is he going to say to her? The problem I have with this scene is that Katara, I think purposefully Katara is meant to be written as being maybe slightly more guided by her emotions here, not really thinking clearly, being somewhat irrational and unfair at this moment. So her logic of basically saying, oh, you changed your mind once, so who's to say you won't change it again, that you changed your mind because you loved my father, but what if you fall out of love with my father, then you'll change your mind again. It's pretty frustrating to see Katara act like this, and that, like, I understand where she's coming from. I do, because she's only recently returned home, and everything has changed, and she's frustrated with that. That, plus her father's moving on, plus the relationship with Melina, and all these reveals about Melina. You can see where her frustration comes from, but it's frustrating to see Katara like this. This feels a little like the way she treated Zuko prior to like 316 of ATLA. That when he was part of the team, she just really wasn't having any of him until he really put himself out there to try and help her with the situation with her mother. It feels like Melina's going to have to do something like that for Katara now to kind of get her to, listen to her and accept her again. Which could lead to some pretty interesting stuff, but I don't think they've fundamentally presented Melina as being too much in the wrong here with this situation, in that she's been fairly honest about it, and that she's in private, told Hakoda exactly what the plan was and that it changed. And the only mistake she's made was not realizing that her brother hadn't changed the plan, and perhaps not being fully open with everyone about how she initially felt. So it leaves Katara in you're kind of frustrated with Katara a little bit by the end, that she's kind of just being kind of so irrational about this. But as I said, we end with one of Hakoda's troops basically giving Gilak his meal in prison, and along with the meal, she gives him the key to his cell. And basically just says that, what you said earlier, a lot of it makes sense to me. I've never trusted the Northerners, so Southerners are being kind of convinced over to his side, and he's being let out. I don't think it has a ton of impact, because we knew already that Gilak was going to get out in part 3. The problem is that he's not much of a threat. In that, one, we have to suddenly jump from, okay, Gilak is out, to all of his forces are out. And even then, all of his forces were taken out by, Aang, Katara, Toph, Sokka, and a couple of Hakoda's guards. His forces are not that big of a threat, unless they completely take everyone by surprise in part 3. I don't know what exactly is going to happen. What Gilak has to say is interesting, in that he's changing people's thoughts and minds about this situation, and it's turning this into a real issue. But I don't really know fundamentally what they're really planning to go for. And I think that's the fundamental weakness of this book, is that it's great, it's really good, and then just at the end it kind of is oh, we have to wrap up part 2, we need to leave stuff for part 3, and they just left a lot for part 3 to do. That it ends in mid-air, as I said, with just Katara frustrated with Melina, not listening to her, and the whole Hakoda's going to say something to Melina, who knows what it is. I don't really know what that's going to be, because he clearly knows about Melina and trusts her, and to some extent, the only thing I could see her talking about was just did you know that your brother had done this, or I'm so sorry that your brother betrayed you like that. Maybe he asks Melina to marry him? I don't know. That would be, I think, a bit over dramatic given the situation. Poor timing on Hakoda's part. I don't really know. Maybe he's just going to ask her to stay, given that he maybe knows that she wants to leave now. But I don't know. There's a lot to do, as I said, in part 3. King Kuei is coming. Zuko's coming. Aang, Toph, Sokka need more development. You still need to do stuff with Katara, Melina, Malik, Gilak. So much to resolve in just one book. And given that part 2, when you really think about it, it didn't get a ton done, I'm a little bit worried about part 3. But to some extent I feel that way with every part 2, so I have some confidence that they will get it done in part 3. It's just a little bit frustrating how the book comes to an end. And I'm interested to see how other people feel about the book as they read it, especially the ending, but overall, as I said, I love so many of these moments. I like how Melina is portrayed. Even though Malik obviously makes some bad choices, I like the way they're writing his character. Just some interesting ideas coming up. Gilak is interesting despite how extreme he is. Hakoda is extremely well written. Katara, apart from a little bit at the end, is well done. And I want more from the other characters. So it's made me want more, and in that sense the part 2 is a success. So going to end the video there. Once again, link in the description to my written review and the podcast review. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.